It was a cold January morning when I first stepped into the grasslands. With the first rays of the sun, the dews on the grass beds shimmered like mirrors, and something in me knew it was love. The vast stretches of grasslands, the sub-Himalayan grasslands that extends from the northern part of India to the northeast India, between the foothills of the mighty Himalayas and the floodplains of these big rivers like the Ganges and Brahmaputra, may appear serene and simple, but underneath this beauty lies a powerhouse of life, performing vital ecological and economic functions, supporting biodiversity, storing millions of carbon, and sustaining hundreds of communities. Yet, this delicate balance today is being increasingly under threat, from land conversion to agricultural lands, from urbanization, the fragmented of this contiguous landscape, overgrazing impacting the soil health, the invasive plants outcompeting the native vegetation, and the climate change, of course, altering the rainfall pattern and temperature. Put together, this is slowly eroding the Earth's one of the most productive but overlooked ecosystems. Now, fast forward 5 years from my last visit to the grasslands. What I see in front of me is barely unrecognizable. The invasive plants has outgrown. The invasives like Chromolina and Mycenia and many others are now choking the grasses that I once admired. It lies just in front of my eyes. Well, there were reports of degradation, but to me, it was not just data anymore. It is deeply saddening to see the grasslands that I loved, choking from such pressure. I knew that I had to do something. We are living through a time, one of the most critical moments in the Earth's history, I believe, because the choices that we make today will decide the future of our climate, of our environment, and most importantly, of ourselves. I know that I couldn't change the whole world. It is just not humanly possible. But also what I know is I can make a humble beginning with these grasslands that I have known for years. And I decided to do what I do best, to study this ecosystem, to understand what was happening and how I could contribute to make it better, to bring back the biodiverse ecosystem in all its complexities. I'm talking about the Manas National Park in Assam of 2014. As I move forward with the plan, the idea was very simple, to bring back the right kind of green and life will find its way. The herd of elephants, the big cats and the deer that once retreated to the upland in the north, or the grassland-dependent animals like the pygmy hawk, the Bengal florican, the hawk deer, or the one-horned rhinoceros that once struggled to live in these grasslands, will roam freely in these lush grasslands. The water that has been flowing will flow clearer, the soil will get richer, and the climate will begin to heal itself. With this motto and enthusiasm, I started the work. For the past 10 years, I have been following the comeback story of these grasslands. And by now, the United Nations have declared this decade, the decade between 2020 and 2030, as the decade of restoration. Yet, in my work and through all the reports worldwide, I see a very troubling trend that disturbs me to the core, that how the word restoration has been misused. Many equate it with just plantation of trees, or even worse, the plantation of non-native species, or a single species plantation in monoculture, which does very little to help the biodiversity, the soil, or the people who are dependent on this ecosystem. Effective restoration doesn't happen by chance. Every restoration project needs careful planned process tailored to the specific needs of the site. It is deliberate, it needs to be deliberate, thoughtful, and rooted in the very understanding that ecosystems are complex, they are resilient, and they take their own time, and the time is worth it takes to bring it back to life. And this is exactly what we did back in 2014. We planned, we surveyed, and we mapped out the priority areas in Manas. During the survey, we find that Of the 200 square kilometer of the grasslands that inhabits the Manas National Park, around 30% of them are degrading and has been invaded to a varied degree. We went back to quantify the baselines, how the vegetation is doing, what is the state of the vegetation, what is the spread of invasion, as every step that we took forward after that should be informed by data. But we soon realized data was not enough. So we went back to the communities, the people who have been living in those areas for generations and have known these grasslands as their backyard for ages. We did community consultations. They were the first one to witness the changes. So their observations, their lived experiences, and their stories, added much depth to our understanding that no data could have captured. Having a plan in place and guided by this data and the local knowledge, the real groundwork began. In the initial years were spent on conducting experiments to understand what could be the best ecological effective way to bring back this grassland ecosystem and also get rid of these invasive plants. And the answer was very simple, surprisingly very, very simple. It was manually uprooting the invasive plants. So having an understanding of that and spent some time with understanding what works best, we applied this on field. We started removing invasive plants from the areas that had invasion as high as 90%. The first year we removed the plants. The native grasses were slow to return. But we didn't lose hope. By the second year, however, we could see a sign of recovery, and that healed us, also the ecosystem. We could see how the native grasses were making a comeback, and we nurtured them carefully, as if giving the ecosystem a chance to heal itself. Still, there were areas where the native grasses were still slow to return. And again, there were areas, large tracts of areas, those remain bare even after the removal of the invasives. So we targeted plantation, grass planting. Again, this plantation were just not for the sake of it. These were guided by the knowledge of the local communities, by the forest frontline staff to select the right kind of species to help the ecosystem regain its balance, as well as accelerate the process of natural recovery. While we worked with the degraded and the invaded grasses, we also made it a priority to protect the grasslands that were still standing tall and untouched. Protecting and safeguarding the remnants, the last remnants of this beautiful sub-Himalayan ecosystem. As we move ahead with our work, and in the last 10 years, we have worked to revive around 500 hectares of grasslands. With continued efforts, the ecosystem was slowly but steadily responding. The natural vegetation made a comeback, and with it did the herbivores. We understood that restoration takes their own time. You just cannot fasten up the process. It's a nature's call. You just have to work and wait for the results. With a lot of patience, long-term commitment, and trial and error methods, we continued our journey. It wasn't easy. It was frustrating at certain times. You have a lot of compliances, but with every new sprout of grasses, my hopes also rose. I knew I could do it with my team, with the support of the local communities, which they call home. So I continued the work with a very simple goal: protect the ones that are still pristine, nurture the ones that needs help, and engage with the people who know this ecosystem the best. The journey, I believe, is far from over. I'm still working, tailoring my efforts to the need of the people, to the need of the land, to help this ecosystem thrive once again, and in doing so, ensure our well-being as well. Thank you.